Hello, it's Len from Straight Talk from the Homeland, and thank you for returning to the channel. It's a new year. Uh, we have some very interesting politics around the world with the new US administration, but I think we need to be a little positive. There's always a silver lining somewhere. And as the Biden administration didn't do terribly much for Armenia, as I see it, with the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh and continued support to Azerbaijan. I'm hoping that there'll be a positive change for Armenia. There are people within the administration like Tulsi Gabbard, new director of national intelligence, who knows Artsakh and knows the situation for Armenia. So it's possible that with people like her who understand the situation, it could turn into a very good year for peace in 2025. And speaking of peace, the Armenian government has been talking about peace for some time, and that's very laudable. That's the correct approach. But sometimes some of us get concerned about what seems to be messages of appeasement, which in front of a dictator is never a good idea. We know that looking weak in front of a dictator just greenlights them. And indeed, as we see, every time Armenia gives something, Azerbaijan just takes, and has new demands. So, whilst I understand that the political leaders have to have a little bit of theatre, they have to probably they understand full well that things like the Crossroads of Peace is never going to work, because anything that strengthens Armenia economically is never going to be accepted by Azerbaijan. And of course, Aliyev has already rejected it, so it's hardly surprising. But we have to understand that sometimes political leaders have got to say things that are there for political consumption. And so it doesn't matter whether you're Dashnak or what color you are, what political faction, or if you're independent or even not Armenian like me. I think the important thing is to stay united and not be too critical. We need to be united in front of the enemy. The enemy is the only one that benefits from us being at each other's throats. Of course, in a democracy, we should disagree, and that's the nature of this video, because some of you who have been following the channel for some time will know that I proposed in 2020 an alternative plan for peace, and I'm hoping that this might be considered even as late as now, because we do need to avoid war at all costs. Both Armenia and I think also the oppressed people in Azerbaijan also need to avoid war. We don't want to see any more young and Yara bleu. But the question is, if the Crossroads of Peace is not going to work, and that seems so, then what's the plan B? Is it like hoping that the Turks will not attack? Because for sure they're not going. They seem as if they're never going to stop unless they get their Zangezur Corridor, because that corridor is extremely geopolitically strategic to them, as it is for Russia. So the pressure is always going to be on. My plan from 2020, as shocking as it sounds, was to actually allow Azerbaijan to have that as a sovereign corridor. But Armenians always seem to think that if you give that corridor, then the link between Iran and Armenia is broken. And they don't think for a moment that you can bridge that corridor, and you can have Iran as a guarantor, because Iran has as much to lose as Armenia if that link is broken. And the unhindered access across those bridges linking Iran and Armenia is more than plausible. But Azerbaijan wants that corridor for free. They think that the betrayers in the Kremlin gave that corridor for free in the so-called 9 November 2020 statement, which was illegal. It's a ceasefire document, but it included treaty clauses like number 9, which purported to provide well, it's not called a corridor, but anyway, unhindered access. So it doesn't matter how you look at it. Anyway, that statement is null and void in any case, because Azerbaijan and Russia broke every clause. And so what to do? Well, Azerbaijan's not going to get that corridor for free, is it? So that's the basis of my original plan, was to say, okay, so you want that corridor, give Artsakh and the connecting lands back. After all, Artsakh, they had every right to be independent. Azerbaijan was not an internationally recognized sovereign state until the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, which, at a time actually that Artsakh was already separate legally under Soviet law. So not only does the International Court of Justice require Azerbaijan to allow Armenians back, but they have to go back into an independent nation. They cannot live within Azerbaijan, not in a land where people have been taught since childhood to hate Armenians. It's just not plausible. So that's the difference between politicians who talk about the rights and security of Artsakh people, and they know full well that what they're talking about is bullshit within the Azerbaijan context, but they don't offer any practical steps how to achieve that. Of course, Azerbaijan's never going to accept international peacekeepers on their territory. I mean, they threatened to shoot the international observers on the Armenian side of the border. So can you imagine asking them to have peacekeepers on their side? It's just never going to work. Not plausible. So what's your plan B? If you don't want war and the crossroads of peace aren't going to work, then what's your plan B or C? What is it? Do you just sit and hope that nothing's going to happen? I don't think that's a good idea, given the bellicose nature of the neighbours. They're not going to stop until they get that corridor. They've made it very clear. So, what to do? I think the new administration in the US can be very helpful in dialoguing with the powers in the region, and I include Iran in this. Remember, Iran is going to have to be the guarantor of this. And they are going to have to sit down and talk anyway at some stage, not about Armenian stuff. So why not come here? Why can't the US and Iran sit down and also solve the problem between Armenia and Azerbaijan as much as it can be at the moment? And I want to be very positive. I think we're all stressed, worrying about everything that the governments say or the dictator in the neighbouring country says. But it's possible that if we all come together and we're all united and we see that there's a potential for genuine peace, then 2025 can be something special, and we can have something to celebrate in Stepanakert. So, in summary, it doesn't matter where you are, Armenia or overseas, if you're Armenian or non-Armenian like me, let's all get together, let's be positive, let's support the Armenian government, let's not get too upset about political statements, and let's work behind the scenes and see if it's possible to find a genuine peace with a land swap arrangement. There's nothing to lose. But there is a lot to lose if we sit and do nothing. This is Len from Straight Talk from the Homeland.